Warning, this is a dark Eldar video. It may contain disturbing images. Viewer discretion is advised. Back to a new episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark? Eldar. We will be going over the best things to take your enemy alive. Make sure to stay to the end, for a gift awaits thee. Thank you, Igor. I will take it from here. Welcome back to the War Academy, where the more you learn, the less you lose. Today, we're going to be going over some of my favorite Dark Eldar units. My favorite things to inflict pain, my favorite things to absorb the pain.
Having trouble with a living? You tired of having your home space violated? You want to get rid of them pesky living critters once and for all? Well, come on down and see me, folks, because I'm the Archive's leading bioexorcist. Yes, there is. Come on down here, and I want to tell you, I'll do anything.
Make sure you hit subscribe and get that blessing of Kimura on your dice. And let's get started.
Do it.
Before we go into some of the awesome combos of Dark Eldar, guys, I rate a lot of your lists. Go ahead, send me your lists on Discord. I'll totally check them out and tell you what my thoughts are on them. But I don't want to see lists with any of these following units in them. Old school Dark Eldar players, you're not going to like my first one.
Let's see the truth. What in the... Oh, son of a bitch! Jerry, don't!
I want to see.
No, you do not!
Mandrakes, guys, Mandrakes just suck. Don't use Mandrakes. They're such a cool model lore-wise. I love them that way, but shelf them for now. Keep the dust off of them. They'll have their day someday. Next thing I don't want to see, guys, is any of Absdurovek's exes.
Refer to Vex as my ex again, and I will send you to the flesh laboratoire.
Don't use Blood Brides. They're so bad. They used to be so good. They're so bad now. They just don't do what they need to do. The extra AP is kind of nice into Armor Contempt, but these things just struggle to earn their point cost back. And they're way too easy to kill this shooting. Next, you guys need to remember, you're supposed to torture them, not yourself. And that's why you should not use the Void Raven Bomber. The Void Raven Bomber is kind of like taking Grind Them Down, where it's something you sometimes wish you might have had, but anytime you actually use it, it's going to shit the bed. I'm guilty of the same thing. I read those rules and I was like, oh, fucking shit, this thing's crazy. I'm going to fucking assassinate characters. It's going to be amazing. And that doesn't happen a lot of the time. Relying a strategy on something that really only goes off on a 4+ is a bad idea just alone. But paying a ton of points to do it is an even worse idea. Just take the Razorwing. Is much better aircraft if you want one. You guys know what lives fast and dies young? Fucking Reavers, dude. Reaver jet bikes? Get that out of here. Trying to field Reavers, you missed your boat. They had their time in the sun, and it is not right now. Lastly, they even made a song about this one, guys. Don't fear the Reaper. It's not dangerous. It's bad. It does D6 shots. It's just inefficient compared to a Ravager. I don't want to see any lists with a Reaper in it. If any of you love one of these units, just know that I am feeding on your pain right now. And I appreciate that. And that's why I'm going to help you play better. Make sure you subscribe to my channel. I'm really close to hitting 1,000 subscribers. If you don't hit the subscribe right now, that's some bad juju. Like, do good things, get good results, and you're playing a dice game. Hit the subscribe button. You should just roll better because of the good karma. Imagine the blessings that would be bestowed upon your dice if you signed up for my Patreon.
Do it.
I don't know. If you lose your next game because of bad dice rolls and you didn't subscribe, you know why. Since the release of the Dark Eldar Codex, the unit that I've probably used the most, and that's made it honestly into every single one of my armies, is Scourges. There are two types of Scourges that you like to run, and one's 72 points, and that's the R&D Scourge, and one's going to be 100 points. So these guys at 72 points, that's pretty reliable R&D. My rule of thumb is it's okay to do R&D with it if it costs under 90. At 100 points, these guys come with 4 blaster shots. So 4 blaster shots, that's similar to 2 multi-meltas. It's a lot of damage for only 100 points. A lot of people who are newer to 40k will tend to deep strike melee units, and that's not how you do it. Deep striking ranged units is extra reliable. The fact that you can just come in, you're a small footprint, you come in wherever you want to get perfect shot on whatever you need to kill. Not to mention, whether you're using the R&D version or using the damage version, these guys are great at doing behind enemy lines. So for that reason alone, because I'm not a biggest fan of Herd the Prey, I tend to go for behind enemy lines, and I always use 3 packs of Scourges. So sometimes I'll do 1 pack that's 72 points for R&D, and then 2 that are damage. Other times I'll just use 3 of the 100-point damage ones. If you do try out 3 squads of Scourges, make sure you take 1 with Heat Lances, because one thing I've noticed is Heat Lances are going to be -1 to hit when they drop in, which is a bummer, but it's not a bummer when you're shooting at something that's -1 to hit already. So if you're going for a Be'lakor, or if you're going for anything, there's lots of things in this game that are -1 to hit. On the next turn, these guys are going to be the stronger of the 3 because of the fact that they're going to sit still and then hit on 3s with their Heat Lances. I make sure I put them in the most defensible position of each one that I deep strike. Besides the point cost, the other reason why these guys just win out over Mandrakes is they have a 14-inch move. This is a rare unit that's actually able to do R&D and have enough movement that it might be able to do R&D in another quarter as well. And not a lot of units in this game can do that. A really good way to protect these guys is when you deep strike, make sure you're deep striking in cover. Inside of a ruin that's in the opponent's back territory is a great place because we have a great CP that gives you +1 to your armor save while you're in cover. So these guys have a natural 4-up. They go into cover, they get a 3-up. You spend 1 CP for Hunt from the Shadows, and they go to a 2+ save. I mean, these little 1-wound dudes are actually a little harder to remove than what your opponent might expect. The other thing I love about using 3 squads of these guys is the atmosphere and thematic feel it gives you when you're playing Dark Eldar and 15 of these elves with wings just swoop down, ready to... The opponent doesn't even know what they're going for yet. It's a very intimidating sight to behold when 15 Scourges come dropping out of Deep Strike, ready to blow a hole through your opponent's favorite things. So next up, I'd like to talk about Drazhar. So Drazhar is one of my favorite things in the entire Dark Eldar Codex, but he's got a lot of drawbacks. Drazhar comes in at 145 points, and that's what makes him one of the best assassins in the game. 145 points is what a lot of Smash captains actually cost nowadays, and the fact that Drazhar is a beast, he can just about take on anything in the game and win. But the level of what he can assassinate really changes depending on how your army list looks. And that's kind of the trick to Drazhar. You have to make decisions, really important decisions, when you're making your list. To be the most effective, he needs to be the Warlord. So by making Drazhar the main Warlord, you can take his Eternal Hatred, which gives him full reroll hits and full reroll wounds. So he is way stronger than he normally even is. But that reduces the need to take an Archon. So that means you cannot run real space raids. So depending on your army, like how reliant you're going to be on an Archon giving you reroll ones, like you can't do real space raid. That's a bummer. You're also most likely going to miss out on Court of the Archon. So not that Drazhar's doing the same thing as an Archon, it's just generally you're going to be taking a triple patrol with Dark Eldar, and you're going to have a Coven, most likely a Witch Cult because you want a Succubus, and the fact that you don't have another room for Archon, and he's not going to be the Warlord. So the difference between Drazhar being the Warlord is literally his ability to assassinate targets. So Drazhar as a Warlord, he can take on things as strong as Soul Grinders. He can really mop up just about anything in the game when he's your Warlord. But you don't always have to run him that way. He doesn't need the reroll hits and reroll wounds to assassinate much smaller targets, in which case you could have taken the Archon. Now this is something to think about. So when you field Drazhar, it's going to cost you, the normal way people run him, it's 445 points to take Drazhar, and that is brutal. So this is Drazhar with his 2 squads of 10 Incubi, all in a Raider, and then the Raider's going to have the Grenade Launcher, the Grizzly Trophies, and the Chain Snares. And yeah, 445 points. I believe that's slightly more than Be'lakor. This is strong, yes, but this becomes a very bad thing in a newer Dark Eldar player's hands. Wasting a 445 point raider can cost you, again, that's a quarter of your army almost. That's all relying on making sure it does something really important. So maybe you will opt towards a cheaper route and you go with a Venom. So Drazhar with just 5 Incubi in a Venom with Chain Snares and Grizzly Trophies is going to cost you still 320 points for that package. That's a lot. I'm not saying it's bad. It's just something that's very important to know when you're playing this unit. You need to know, okay, I spent this much points on it. I better damn make sure that I make something happen. If you consider yourself more at a intermediate level of gameplay, I do recommend running Drazhar just on foot by himself. He's a beast of an assassin. For 145 points, you just run him around and he kind of goes off on his own adventure, just killing shit, helping where help is needed. And there's not much your opponent can do about where he is. And as you get better at using Drazhar, then you can upgrade him to get him to those key points that you're trying to get him to. But running him on foot is how I recommend learning him. Running Incubi on foot, that's not a good idea. Those dudes will get shot off the board in no time. So it's something you just take Drazhar by himself. You guys know that in Kamara, they once named a bridge after Drazhar, but they had to take it down because no one dared to cross it. You feed on that pain you feel from that joke. Now, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. People are playing Covens wrong. There's a secret Coven. So the secret Coven involves master torturers with splinter blades. What this Coven does, splinter blades gives all Coven units exploding 6s. Then master torturers reduces the reroll wound stratagem torturer's craft by 1. So I've tested the new Army of Renown tons of times now, and I really wanted the Army of Renown to be my awesome Coven army, because Covens are the reason I play Dark Eldar. I love the whole undead feel of it, but this is much, much stronger than the Army of Renown. Now, besides the fact that CP is just more limited than it used to be, that's one reason why the Army of Renown is really CP heavy, but the fact that you can run Master Torturers and Splinter Blades with a real space raid will allow your Archon to give everybody reroll 1s, which is what you would normally be paying for with the Army of Renown. This might not sound like the craziest thing yet, but just don't worry, I'm getting there. So how this is working is when you have exploding 6s, the exploding 6s is the same math as doing +1 to hit. So for example, if I roll 6 dice, math will say I get a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The 6 explodes and comes back in and counts as a hit. That's the same as hitting 2s. I lost the 1 and the 2 and kept the other dice, and now I'm adding 1 back. It's like hitting on 2s. And you guessed it, when you have +1 to hit from your power from pain, this essentially gives you 100% chance to hit. All of you watching this video should know how strong Incubi are with the +1 to wound from Drazhar, and the difference between having Drazhar near them and not having Drazhar near them. That +1 to wound lets you take on a lot bigger targets. But what if I told you that something better than +1 to wound is reroll wounds? If you're going to wound on 5s and you have +1 to wound to bring it to 4s, that's good. If you're going to wound on 5s and have full rerolls to wound, that's better. It's not quite as good as wounding on 3s. It's more like wounding on 3.5s. So what ends up happening with Torturer's Craft is the fact that it costs 1 CP to cast on Rax and 2 CP to cast on Grotesque changes it to 0 CP for Rax and 1 CP for Grotesque.
Oh, what, really?
This creates an insane amount of stagger damage that you can do. So if you're hitting the opponent in waves, even if it's just 5 racks going back into combat or something, they can punch way above their point cost because they basically have 100% chance to hit with reroll wounds. They'll chunk things. And the cool thing is they'll a lot of times wound on 4s. So the fact that they have low strength isn't even that big a deal against infantry. You're going to wound on 4s rerolling. And this is why these things become dangerous to almost anything in the game. When it really starts to shine is during your late game. So the fact that your CP's low late game and you're having to make really clutch decisions, but you have this unit. If you have 1 squad of racks left, that rack unit can jump somebody and just reroll wounds for free. when you need to do a little bit of a CP dump, that grotesques are a great target for that, because grotesque problem, they have a lot of attacks and they do good damage and they're reliable, but they're low strength. So by giving them the Torture's Craft Stratagem, you're giving them reroll wounds on their 5s to bring them, basically, like I said, it's like wounding on 3.5s. You have to play the army slightly different if you're used to running the -1 damage setup. This is a lot more like how Dark Eldar have felt in past editions, where you move fast and you hit hard. And that's why building an army that can naturally take a lot of damage means, to really make good use of this, you're going to probably have a lot of grotesques. The other reason why I'm having so much success with this Coven is the fact that our secondary game has changed, and we don't really get rewarded much for shooting units. And the fact that speccing it heavy into any Coven is going to be a really melee heavy army, this means you can actually score take them alive secondary fairly easy. Majority of my games, I'm getting minimal 10 points, usually maxing it out. I do tend to take heavy Coven though.
I'm gonna rip your skin. I'll stick 20 needles in your eyeballs.
If you guys aren't used to using racks, make sure you always have ossifactors. Not only is an ossifactor, I think that's how you say it, it's an amazing weapon that it punks Space Marine. It's really sneaky on such a cheap unit, but what I use it for a lot of times, especially first turn, is I'll move the racks up, shoot the ossifactors or their hex rifle, and then I don't care what I do for damage, but then I'm gonna use the move shoot move stratagem to move on to an objective. This has been super handy into putting that early game pressure to force my opponent to come out, so I can do a lot of counter charges. And the thing doing those counter charges is my hands down favorite unit, which is the grotesques. So the grotesques come at 105 points, which is 35 points per model. These things are absolute monsters. No, not that kind of monster. It's not just damage you're taking these guys for. These guys are generally about the same price or cheaper than most Terminator units out there, and they function, in my opinion, better than a Terminator. When I play Dark Eldar, most of the time these are my primo trade unit. The fact that they're 105 points means chances are I cost less than whatever it is you're going to use to kill me. Now, for their point costs, at 35 points per model, these things do punch. I'm not saying they're just defensive. They got 5 attack, strength 5, AP2, 2 damage, and that, like, when they're hitting on 2s and have exploding 6s, and especially if you use the Torture's Craft on to give them reroll wounds, if you decide to use a squad of 5 of them, the squad of 5 becomes a, like, super brick powerhouse that can fuck up just about anything it charges, but its roll changes completely compared to the 105 point ones, which are meant as like a really, really good and point efficient speed bump to your opponent that's going to allow you to create really good opportunities for counter charges. So the reason why I like these guys better than a Terminator is not just their speed and the fact that a lot of times they can advance and charge, but it's because of the way a 5-up Feel No Pain works, specifically when on a 4-wound model. I consider myself really good at Math Hammer. I have a Math Hammer video you guys can check out. There isn't a Math Hammer to killing a grotesque efficiently. So you could say, oh, I'll use a Melta. Well, unless you're in Melta range, there's a very good chance, like, you're going to average technically a 3.5 on your damage, and I have 4 wounds. If I shrug one of them with a Feel No Pain or pass one of my invuln, pass my invuln is going to hurt you bad, but passing my one Feel No Pain makes it so your next multi-meltas a lot of times doing damage to a 2-wound or 1-wound model. So the thing that actually counters this, you're going to run into it more in melee, which is kind of where you excel anyways, but high strength, low AP, high damage is the thing you want to stay away from. Off the top of my head, the only thing that comes to mind that really fits that profile is the flamethrowers on a Moirax. Those things are like strength a lot or wound really well, and they're AP 0, damage 3. Those things are highly dangerous to grotesque. But who the hell's, like, you don't see a lot of Moiraxes. I mean, if you've played a Moirax in the past month, then maybe you don't want grotesque, but you're not going to see a lot of people using the weapons that are meant to deal with grotesque, especially with the Armor of Contempt. So what'll happen is your opponent is either gonna overkill or he's gonna underkill these things. Even someone who's really good at the game, they're gonna screw up killing them. It's the only way to deal with them. You have to put excessive amounts of damage and just be okay with the fact that a lot of your high damage is gonna get turned to damage 1 because you didn't quite kill it. The Feel No Pain on 4 wound models with no armor is a really, really unique combo in this game. And not only is it unique, the Grotesque fills a really unique role that you don't normally find in Dark Eldar, which is a super big pile of meat that's just going to absorb a lot of damage. And Dark Eldar generally being a glass cannon army, that's one of their weaknesses, and you can fix that weakness real easy with just a couple squads of 3 Grotesques. Remember, with the reroll wound strat, generally these things do outpunch Incubi. They definitely cost about double what an Incubi does, but the fact that having reroll wounds is better than having +1 to wound. I'm not saying Incubi are bad though. Incubi are a great unit. This is just a more unique take on it. The last thing I wanted to discuss about the Covens is my favorite thing with Covens is the Moxites. So back when you could mix detachments, there was a lot of times, one of my successful armies was triple Coven, and I had one that was, when Dark Eldar first came out, I had a Dark Technomancer. The majority of it was the -1 damage, and then I had my Splinter Blades, Torturer's Craft as my 3rd detachment. You can't do that anymore. And the -1 damage and the Dark Technomancers all got nerfed to shit. But I mainly did that so I could take 3 squads of Homoxites. I freaking love these guys. They're 115 points. They are a super high skill, high reward unit. So just like with the Grotesque, the Games Workshop model for Grotesque looks freaking stupid, and the model they have for Rax looks stupid. They make awesome 3D printed versions of Rax and Grotesque that you can use as Homoxites. So these things in combination with Rax, this is kind of the reason why a lot of people play Death Guard. I'm a huge horror movie buff, and that's why I want to say, if you guys, Halloween just happened, I would love to know what you guys' favorite horror movie that you've seen recently is. I'm looking for more horror movies. I've seen a bunch of great ones.
Do it.
All right, back onto the Rax, the Homoxites. So these guys are much stronger and more versatile than the Rax. So these guys can tank big units and have small amount that you're looking for to tank big units that have small amounts of powerful attacks. So what these guys do is, say for example, you got a Redemptor coming at you and you manage to get Homoxites on this thing. Well, just 6 attacks on the first turn. 6 attacks goes to on average 4 hits because he's hitting on 3s. And then it goes to 3 to 4 wounds because he's gonna wound you on 2s. You automatically pass one of those, the first failed save, and you have double the survivability of a rat because you have a 5-up invuln instead of a 6-up invuln that late game goes to a 4-up invuln. So how the math will work out is you're gonna have 1 auto pass and you're gonna have 1 just regular pass. So 2 models now need to take Feel No Pains from being hit by a Redemptor. You can tie that thing up all game with a pack of Homoxites. That's why these guys are super matchup dependent, and it does take a skilled commander. You need to know your opponent's army and know like where are his low attack, hard hitting guys. That's who the Homoxites are going to target from turn 1 and just hunt them. Rax and Homoxites, they ain't your run-of-the-mill zombie. These are like the zombies from Dying Light, the parkour zombies. Like 28 days later, those zombies were fast, and that's what made them scary, and that's why playing Covens is so much fun. So I know a lot of people don't consider these guys because they just think about, oh, I shrug off a damage, but I pay more points for that. It's not really worth it. It's really the double invuln save that makes these guys a pain in the ass, because it's a 5-up, 5-up. If you try mathing out, take any unit you want, just go into the 5-up invuln, 5-up Feel No Pain. But when it's, if you can save these guys to the late game when they get a 4-up invuln because of the power from pain, oh, they are one of the most point efficient tar pits in the game. The best thing is I know all you Dark Eldar players are familiar with playing people who aren't familiar with Dark Eldar. And normally when people see zombies, they think it's not that big of a threat. And that's what makes these things so powerful. When you have the reroll wound strat and you have exploding 6s, these things punch really hard, and they're actually a pain in the ass to fully remove. They're very, very easy for the enemy to just go, I don't need to deal with them until it's too late. All right, don't worry. I'm done talking about how freaking awesome Covens are. And I'm going to move on to something a little more interesting. This next guy, is one of the most underrated. I have so much success with it. I kind of know why, but I don't even know why it's working as well as it does. And that's the Beastmaster. So the Beastmaster is an elite choice. He's 40 points. He usually comes as a free slot. But what this guy does is he's a great unit to put the Animus Vitae on. You're almost always going to use the Animus Vitae, the grenade that increases power from pain. So by being able to put it on a Beastmaster, it actually opens up Helm of Spite onto the Homunculus. So the Homunculus will be able to deny a spell, which normally Dark Eldar can't do at all, which can be really, really clutch when someone just rolls low. You're basically just, I use a Helm of Spite all the time because of Pyramid Head here. You're just waiting for someone to make a roll low on a psychic test. You go to deny it, and if you do deny it, not only do you stop the spell, but they peril. This guy's way more efficient at delivering the Animus Vitae because of his huge movement speed. Then you give him the drug, because witches have to take drugs, that improve his ballistic skill.
God, do I need to take more Adderall, or am I taking too much Adderall?
So the fact that this guy's fast, he's good at tying stuff up. He's also a free slot. He can block charges really well. There's not a lot of things in the game that cost more than 40 points. So pretty much if he's able to absorb a charge, it's effectively CCing a unit, and he can get to where he needs to be when you don't need him anymore. And you might think that this whole thing, like, why would I ever want a Beastmaster? It's 40 points of kind of garbage, and you're right. But it gives reroll ones and advance and charge to the real reason we take her. And that is for the Clawed Fiends. So the Clawed Fiends are 25-point model of evilness. You do have to be a real space raid to really max out the effectiveness of these guys, because they do take up a fast attack slot. But few units in the game can trade with this and come out ahead. The fact that, like, I've used Fiends to absorb a Bloodthirster charge, to absorb a Bellicor charge, to absorb, Redemptor Dreadnought charges. Just, this is a fatty little model that can really block lanes, and it's super, super efficient at it. If anything has to divert melee attacks into this guy, it's not going to trade well for your opponent. But to force those trades, you have his 10-inch advance and charge. So the Beastmaster gives him the advance and charge and reroll ones if you need. He also gets like more attacks if he's wounded or some shit. But mainly a 10-inch move is what you're using this guy for. He can get to where he needs to be. So even though you are casting a buff on these guys, usually with the advance and charge, you have to take the Beastmaster in order to take the Clawed Fiend, which kind of sucks. That's why the previous section was like, if you're going to have to take a Beastmaster, you might as well get the most out of them. But the Clawed Fiend is definitely best as a single model unit. So 3 squads of 1 will only cost you 75 points, but will use 3 fast attack slots, which is kind of a bummer. So normally I'm taking triple patrol, so I'm only getting 2 Fiends, but because I also want 3 Scourges. Are you still not sold on this guy? 25 freaking points and you're still not sold? Let me go over what this guy can actually do. You can deny deep strike, you can tie up tanks, you can absorb smites, you can absorb monster charges, you can block enemy movement, you can low target priority for the enemy, you have move through ruins just like infantry does because you're a freaking beast and you're not cavalry. You also create great opportunities for counter charges. If someone does charge you, then you're just going to charge them right back because they're out in the open. And this is a great, amazing unit to not just set up plays, but to deny your opponent his plays.
I'll do anything. I'll scare them real bad. The point is, folks, I'm going to do anything to get your business. Hell, I'll possess myself if I gotta. Whoa! Yo, I got demons running all through me.
And remember, guys, the learning doesn't stop here. Make sure to stop by my Discord for even more Dark Eldar tips. Being Dark Eldar players, we like to do things with style, including secondary objectives. Check out these secondary objectives. I've got a few stratagems in here too. I'm giving these away on my Patreon. Just take an old land and an old Magic the Gathering sleeve and just stick this over the top of it. It's a much cooler and easier way to do your secondary objectives. The link to the Discord and the Patreon will be down in the description.
Do it.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to leave your favorite horror movie in the comments.
And let them out of your sex dungeon.